Who is the bad guy in history who isn't actually a bad guy? Charles Lightoller, most senior officer who survived the Titanic disaster. He gets mostly remembered for interpreting Captain Smith's order to evacuate as women and children only, leading to the deaths of most of the male passengers. He even got dealt a shitty hand in the James Cameron Titanic, with one scene having him threaten to shoot the passengers like dogs if they didn't order themselves, an event which did not happen. But after the disaster he gave a very honest testimony and did not shy away from being to blame. He was the one who stood up in court and said we were reckless to keep the ship at speed on a calm sea where icebergs would be difficult to see. He later campaigned with the British Board of Trade and other maritime organizations to create new mandatory regulations, basing lifeboat capacity on the number of passengers and crew instead of ship tonnage, conducting lifeboat drills so passengers know where their lifeboats are and crew know how to operate them, instituting manned 24-hour wireless, radio, communications on all passenger ships, and requiring mandatory transmissions of ice warnings to ships, regulations which are still followed today. In May 1940 he heard about the evacuation at Dunkirk on the radio and jumped in his personal yacht the Sundowner and saved 127 men. He was a remarkable man. Lightoller also only survived on the back of a collapsible lifeboat, which was washed off the deck into the ocean as the bow dipped underwater. He had to climb out of the water, which was around -2 degrees Celsius, and onto the back of the boat. Jack's quote in the movie about ice water being like 1,000 knives digging into his body was a quote from Lightoller. He had to fight for his life to survive, because he had been on board trying to get people off as long as possible. Richard Jewell. Not only did he not plant bombs at the Olympics in 1996, he was actually the hero who alerted that there were bombs in the first place. During the Summer Olympics in Atlanta, while working as a security guard, Jewell noticed a suspicious backpack left unattended in Centennial Olympic Park. Recognizing the potential danger, he quickly alerted law enforcement and helped to evacuate the area, potentially saving countless lives. Unfortunately, instead of being celebrated for his bravery, Jewell became a target of media scrutiny and false accusations. Some news outlets prematurely labeled him as a suspect, leading to intense public scrutiny and a devastating invasion of his privacy. The FBI investigated him, but ultimately cleared him of any wrongdoing. Despite the hardships he faced, Richard Jewell's actions that night proved that he was a true hero, and his legacy serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance and integrity in the face of danger. Peter Lustig, a popular German kids' TV presenter whose legacy got torn down by Bild, Germany's biggest tabloid paper, because he refused to collaborate with them. They made up stuff about him, of how he hated kids, etc., and spread the news so far and wide that the correction, they were sued and forced to write a clarification, has not reached out to everyone yet. So many people to this day still believe the accusation, even after his death, and it's a shame Bild ruined his last years and never really got punished for it. And Boleyn, and tried to leave court when Henry VIII took an interest in her. It was a position her family had worked hard to secure, and one she had trained for. Yet she retreated to Hever Castle to escape his interest. Surviving letters from King Henry VIII showed that he continued to write to her after she had left, wondering why she was refusing his gifts and not sending responses. He would stay nearby at her cousin's estates and ignore her polite refusals. Eventually he traveled to Hever with an offer of marriage. She agreed to marry Henry and was reviled for it. Her contemporaries attempted to paint her as a vile, opportunistic seductress who enthralled the king. In reality, she was relentlessly sexually harassed. It's possible she kept those letters to prove she had done nothing wrong. What a lot of people tend to forget is that, and was deeply pious. It is likely that she learned to accept her fate, as it provided her with the influence to make the kind of reforms she believed in, and indeed it's possible that she played a significant role in Henrician Reformation, and famously became one of the 2 wives that Henry VIII executed. A promising new alliance fell apart when Emperor Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire refused to ratify their marriage. She also had a falling out with her closest ally at court, Thomas Cromwell. Henry was already smitten with Anne's lady-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, and most damning of all, and had failed to produce a male heir. Historians generally agree that the evidence of Anne's adultery was likely fabricated by Henry as an excuse to be rid of her. They pretty much unanimously agree that the accusation that she had an affair with her own brother is entirely made up, despite it costing George Boleyn his life. He gave an impassioned speech at his execution, stating, "Trust not in the vanity of the world, and especially in the flattering of the court." Henry made sure and had a terrible time locked in the Tower of London, where it's reported she had a restless night before her execution. He left her body lying in the square for some time, as proper burial arrangements had not been made, and in his lingering resentment, he tried to erase her from history and court. She became a maligned woman of Tudor history, one who still fascinates popular culture today but only when played as a scheming seductress. She is perhaps one of the longest examples of slut-shaming through history. A victim of sexual harassment, a pious and devout woman who vowed to be no man's mistress, not even a king's, for the crime of not bearing a male heir. She died and lives on as a media mockery of her true self. Her last laugh is that the undesired girl she gave birth to went on to become one of England's greatest queens, Queen Elizabeth I. Henry brutalized his wives in his obsession for a male heir and became surpassed by a woman instead. I like to think this was a little bit of karma for Anne. Alfred Nobel. People assume he invented dynamite so it could be used as a weapon, and blame him for all the millions of war deaths since, and say it's ironic that he created the Nobel Peace Prize. He was from a family of miners, and his father and elder brother both died in gunpowder accidents, so he wanted to create a safe explosive that wouldn't go off if you accidentally dropped it. He was literally trying to save lives. From memory, he campaigned against its use outside mining, as well as setting up the Peace Prize to encourage people to adopt a peace and non-violent stance to international relations. Frederick II. He's also known as the spawn of the devil, so obviously people don't think highly of him, but he was actually a pretty decent leader to his people. It's just either the current pope of that time didn't like him and spread rumors about him which eventually led to him getting that nickname, or just wanted the land he owned. He was hated for things like taking Jerusalem without killing anyone and having good relationship with the Muslim world, making the Sixth Crusade the most successful one without even spilling a drop of blood. The Catholic Church couldn't tolerate something like that. Monica Lewinsky. She was in turn pressured by one of the most powerful men in the world. She did not deserve to be made the villain. In the late 1990s, Lewinsky became embroiled in a scandal involving then-President Bill Clinton. Their affair, which began when she was a young intern at the White House, was initially kept private. However, it soon became the subject of intense media scrutiny and political investigation. As the story broke, Lewinsky was thrust into the spotlight, facing public humiliation and scrutiny as the media painted her as the seductress in a narrative that overshadowed the complexities of the situation. The scandal led to Clinton's impeachment trial, where he was charged with perjury and obstruction of justice, primarily relating to his denial of the affair. Despite being a young woman who found herself in a precarious position, Lewinsky was vilified in a way that often ignored the power dynamics at play. Over the years, she has spoken out about the impact of the scandal on her life, advocating for the importance of compassion and understanding in discussions about public shaming and mental health. Lewinsky's story is a cautionary tale about the consequences of power, gender dynamics, and the often one-sided narratives that emerge in the media. She deserves recognition not as a villain, but as a woman who was caught in a tumultuous situation far beyond her control. She was also super young and was being pursued by the most powerful man in the country, who was kind of her boss, who was older, and who had power over her. Clinton is the villain. Lewinsky is a victim and was treated like a pariah. I hate what people did to her. And who was extremely charismatic. Everyone talks about how Clinton could make you feel important if he was paying attention to you. Imagine if he wanted something from you. You know that. Dingo ate my baby, woman? Her name is Lindy Chamberlain, and her story is both tragic and controversial. In 1980, while camping with her family near Uluru in Australia, Chamberlain's 9-week-old daughter, Azaria, disappeared from their tent. Lindy claimed that a dingo, a wild dog native to Australia, had taken the baby. Despite her assertions, the case quickly became the focus of intense media scrutiny and public speculation. Many people doubted her story, leading to a sensational trial where she was accused of murdering Azaria. In 1982, Lindy was convicted of murder and sentenced to life in prison, while her husband, Michael, stood by her side throughout the ordeal. The case took a dramatic turn years later when new evidence emerged, including the discovery of Azaria's remains in a dingo den, which supported Lindy's original claim. After spending nearly 3 years in prison, she was exonerated in 1988, and the Australian legal system officially acknowledged that a dingo could indeed take a baby. 2 years after they were exonerated, the Chamberlains were awarded $1.3 million in compensation for wrongful imprisonment, a sum that covered less than 1/3 of their legal expenses. "Hey, sorry for accusing you of murdering your own daughter. That was our bad. To make up for it, we're going to give you less than 1/3 of the money you spent trying to prove your innocence. Again, our bad. No hard feelings though, right?" Losing a child is the worst thing a parent can experience, and then to be blamed for that death just makes the suffering unimaginable. The iceberg from the Titanic, just minding its own business, chilling, and suddenly gets blamed for everything. Literally hit and run. Who is the bad guy in history who isn't actually a bad guy? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.